Good evening, viewers. Welcome to another show of Speakers Gallery. But first of all, I want to wish you Happy New Year. Our guest today is Honorable Martha Karua, a 4 times Member of Parliament for the constituency of Gichugu, a former minister, a former presidential candidate, and a leader of a political party. Honorable Martha Karua, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Honorable Martha Karua, you made your debut into the Kenyan Parliament in 1992, the 7th Parliament, the second multi-party elections we had in the country, at a relatively young age of 35. And you, for lack of a better word, floored what was a giant in the Kenyan political and public sector at the time. Jeffrey Karithi, who was the head of the civil service, and he'd been a permanent secretary, a former DC, a former DO, one of the first Kenyans to have a university degree. And you went on to win that seat 3 more times before you decided to run for the presidency. Can you tell us what was your secret? How did you manage to pull off such a powerful feat?
I think it was a journey of faith. I felt a calling. I had been active on the national scene as a member of the Law Society. As I became a leader within the Law Society, and we were agitating for political pluralism. Through the new mediums of communication, KTN had just come on the scene, and it was giving KBC competition. I had become a household name because of my activism within the Law Society. And when multi-party politics came in December 1991, I decided to run for office. It was a journey of faith. I didn't have much money, but I had the courage of my conviction. And I went into that campaign single-mindedly to win the Gichugu seat. Many people thought it was impossible. I was even told that in central Kenya, they do not elect women. I will just end up getting my name known. I will not go far. I would always answer that I'm running to win. And win I did. Through hard work, through God's favor, and through acceptance by the people.
Can you give us a small narrative of your own background? Because people would want to know whether you actually came from a privileged background. So you started somewhere high up there, not quite at the bottom. What kind of a family? Your parents, what they did for a living, and how you grew up yourself?
I'm told before, when I was a small child, both my parents were teaching, but my mother dropped off to look after the family after she had me. I'm the second born. So after 2 kids, she went on to become a housewife and to manage the small farm and the small businesses that they had. And I grew up in a rural setting in Kirinyaga, very much like any other rural folk, helping with the household chores, also helping with the chores in the farm, picking coffee, tea, being sent like any other child, looking after siblings. So a typical rural background and upbringing. We were not really privileged. Teachers were just ordinary folks in the village.
Public school. You did
Public
not go
school,
to a private school.
Yes. They had their respect. Teachers had their respect in the village. But you pretty much did everything the other child next door is doing, like tending to the farm, looking after siblings, working at home. So more or less the same upbringing everybody else
Sometimes
has.
going to school barefoot, I would say.
We went to school barefoot because that was the rule. Standard 1 to 4, I went barefoot until I went to a boarding school in standard 5. That's when now we could wear shoes. You see, when I tell my children I never wore shoes for primary, they wonder whether my father could not afford. The issue of affording could not even come up. Shoes were not on. If you had a pair of shoes, you wore it on Sunday, you see? And you went to school barefoot. Everybody was equal, you see?
You said you're the second. The
I'm the
firstborn
second
was a son?
No, the second born is a sister. We went to school together.
The firstborn?
Yes, we are just 1 year apart, so we went to school together.
So where did the fighting spirit come from? Usually the fighting spirit is if you have boys and then girls and then boys, and that way you have to fight for your space all the time. Where did this very powerful fighting spirit come from? Was it
We are 2 girls ahead, my sister and I, who is 1 year older than me. Then there are 3 boys in the middle, then 2 girls, then finally 1 boy, because we are 4-4, a balanced family,
Yes,
you'd
yes,
call.
yes.
I think you are born the way you are. You know, a few things may change, but I think the character of a person, some is the genetic composition.
And your father did not treat you any different from the boys? I mean, sometimes this is
we were
prejudices. Yeah.
Let me say this, it wasn't pronounced, but like other families growing up at that time, in a rural setting, there were chores for girls and there were chores for boys. So fetching water, cooking at home, washing clothes, those were our duties. The boys will pretty much mind the cattle, the goats, and then we all together go to the farm. Although at some stage my mom taught my brothers how to cook, made sure that they would be able to feed themselves if it became necessary, like when they went to work and all that. There were things that we as girls were asked to do more, you know. And the fighting spirit, may I say that my paternal grandmother, who had a very great influence on me, we were living in the same compound as is usual until her demise when I was already an adult and working as a magistrate. Even the stories she told me of her childhood or how she grew, of her fights, a very, very strong woman. My mother is also a very strong, although soft-spoken and quiet woman, but a very strong woman. My father, a very strong character, and in very many ways I take after him. If the term controversial, because of the decisions I take apply to me, when I look back and remember things my father has done, then I'm pretty much, very much like him.
Your father.
And a very principled person, a person who is driven by the courage of his conviction. So my earliest role models were the people, the adults around me, and that's my mother, my paternal grandmother, and my father.
Would you credit any other luminary who you say has inducted you through the political process?
As I grew up, obviously, you get influenced by the society
friends
around you. I remember very early on.
Sometimes equals who basically help you and
even people far away. I remember when I was in primary school, lower primary, a lady came to visit our school, and we heard, or we were told, that she had a degree. To this day, I do not remember who it was. And a degree sounded like something, you know, something physical. But the way she was treated, I knew a degree was such an important thing to have. And I harbored a desire that one day I may be treated the way I saw her being treated in our school. So you get influenced by things like that. As I grew up, and I would listen to Bunge Today on the KBC radio, which was the only radio, and I would hear members of parliament get to know a few names of the most vocal ones dealing with issues of their constituency. I remember when I was in secondary school in Form 4, telling a girl named Damaris from Muranga, whom I'm no longer in touch with because we went separate, our paths went separate ways. I told Damaris one day that I'll be the member of parliament for Kirinyaga East, that was Gishogo was called those days, and I opined that she would be the member for Kandara. And we are told that what you prophesy with your mouth comes to be, and it ended up being that way, but that just shows I had interest in the current affairs of parliament. Those things attracted me, And those are the things that shape someone. I also remember telling my dad at a very early age, I accompanied him to court where he had a traffic matter. And as we were leaving the court at Kerugoya, I told him I want to be a judge. You know, in the villages, the magistrate is called judge.
Yes.
So my dad looked at me and told me he had no objection to what I want to be, but I must work very hard. You see, I ended up being a lawyer,
yes,
and being a magistrate.
You studied law in the University of Nairobi,
yes,
and the King's School of Law,
yes,
trained as an advocate, practiced as a magistrate.
I was a magistrate for the past 6 years after I graduated from the School of Law, 1981, July to July 1987. And I was on contract, so I served 2 contracts of 3 years each. Then I indicated to the judiciary I didn't want to renew my contract in 1987 when it expired in July, and I went off to private practice. From there, I went on to become a member of parliament, practicing both law and politics for the past 10 years, 1992 to 2002, when I wound down my practice to become a full-time political practitioner. Yeah.
The first one was a serious upset because here was David and Goliath against a former head of civil service. And former head of civil service in Kenya, at the time, for those who don't remember how things function, was the de facto prime minister. That was the most powerful person in the government.
Yes.
And you were able to basically hold your own and win that. And then proceeded on another 3 times. What was the base of, what was your trick? What was the secret to those victories that you sustained in Gishugu with, in most cases, landslides, big landslides? I
went, as I said, with the courage of my conviction. I had a mission, and the mission was to bring transformation, to do something for the people. And mine was just to express myself to the people and tell them of my dream for Gishugu, my dream for Kenya. And I was reminding them that I had been an advocate for change, for a return to plural politics, for expanded democratic space, and respect for the rule of law and human rights. And I used to tell them, you've heard of me, I've been working for you even before you employed me. Just you imagine how much more I would do when you employ me as your representative. So it was a question of convincing them. And I remember, because I was very tiny in size then, anytime I went before the people, and I would have a lady friend accompanying me, some of them bigger than me, the crowd would choose the bigger lady and say, this is the one standing for the seat. And when they are told, no, it's the smaller one, they would wait for me to speak, and they would be very doubtful. Then when I speak, you hear some at the back saying, kanaongea, in Kikuyu, not referring to me as a person, but a person. Yes. But she's talking.
Despite her petite body.
Meaning that I was making a point. I was communicating with them. Yes. So persistently communicating with the people across Gishugu, talking, going where there are football matches, waiting for an opportunity to just talk, even if for 10 minutes, going to churches, going to women's group, all manner of gatherings, introducing myself, persistently giving my message. It took me the whole of 1992. By the time Parliament was dissolved in October 1992, you could feel my strength on the ground. Although my party of choice at that time was Forda Sili, I was rigged out of Forda Sili elections on 12th of September 1992. It was elections for party leadership. I moved to DP 3 weeks later on the 2nd of October. And within a week, Parliament was dissolved. By then, you could feel the undercurrents on the ground that I was gaining strength. So although rigged out of party elections and moving to a new party, and the same month the elections are called, I won the DP nominations. And I became the DP flag bearer to meet the late Geoffrey Kareithi as the Fordasili candidate. We were not the only candidates. Another former member of parliament who is also late, Nahashon Juno was also on the ballot box. So were several other people. One of the people I defeated in DP, or two of them also stood on different parties. And we went on to the campaign. It was violent.
I remember.
It was
tough.
Intimidating. It was tough. My opponents would give money, and especially the former head of civil service. I would tell people I have no money to give, but I have a message to share with them. Some will say we don't want to hear. Others will say just let her speak. I would speak, and I knew I was planting a seed. At the end of the day, I won those elections with a very comfortable margin. And I applied myself. We met in Parliament, and you knew that I was working hard. I applied myself in Parliament. There was no CDF with which you could work with for the people, but I articulated their issues. I was available in the constituency. We had no money for constituency offices, but out of my meager salary, I rented a party office, office for DP,
which was 10,000 salary then.
Yes.
But
and plus allowances
coming to about 20,000, yes.
Yes. With that meager salary.
My allowance was a bit more that time because the mileage, I used to get 8,000 shillings and a few cents for mileage. So I get that 4 times in a week.
Yeah.
And that would come to about 30-something thousand shillings.
Yeah.
Plus 10,000. So the best we could make from out of Parliament was 42,000 those days.
For me, it was 20,000.
Yes.
The mileage could not come to 3,000.
Yes.
So really negligible. We were still doing harambes, maybe taking 20,000 to a church. I could do a minimum of 2 harambes a month, sometimes 3. So my legal practice, which I continued with, is the one that supported
in your programs.
My politics.
Yes, yes.
I went to Parliament not to make money because the job had no money. I went to Parliament because I had a conviction that I could do something to transform Gishugu and Kenya, because you transform Kenya by transforming your village and the next village. And many of the people who came to Parliament that time, including you, were coming because they were convinced. And they had a mission to transform this country. It was politics of conviction, yes.
I'll come to the comparison of that Parliament and this or latter-day parliaments later, but you went into a party of rich people.
Yes.
DP was the conservative mountain region, endowed people of means, and you're poor. How did your own progressive, revolutionary ideas sit in with the party of conservatives, of rich men?
Let me say this, that was the perception that DP was the party of the rich.
Yes.
Maybe we had a few rich people at the top. We had the Jenga Karumes, the former President Mwai Kibaki. We had the John Kins.
Munene Kairu.
We had people like that. But they were in the minority. DP was a party of the ordinary people. And I think most people came to the party because they believed in Mwai Kibaki. They were following Kibaki because I used to hear, and I would repeat it to the people when campaigning, that when Kibaki was Minister of Finance, Kenya was thriving economically. Those were the better Kenyatta years and later Moi years, before the country went down financially. So his reputation was of a serious person who can tackle the ills of the country. And that's how people congregated. So I went to DP, which, as opposed to Matiba's Fordasili, was not led by part of those who fought for party politics, because Kibaki remained in Kanu until the last days of when multi-party had come. But nevertheless, when marketing DP to the people, we were marketing its presidential candidate Kibaki, and we were marketing his reputation as an economic wizard who will be able to cure the ills of the country. And it resonated with the people. So we were able to transform not just Gishugu but Kirinyaga from a Fordasili to a DP zone. So my first entry into parliament, I did not battle Kanu. Kanu was on the losing side.
Yes. Kanu was
they
never,
were the underdogs.
was never an issue in Central Province.
Yes. I actually battled a fellow opposition party and a very popular one. Remember how popular Matiba was.
Absolutely.
And we ended up getting more votes in DP, both Kibaki and I, more than Matiba. You see, we turned Kirinyaga, it joined Nyeri and other places to become a stronghold of DP.
You were at the side of Kibaki. You were one of the, I wouldn't even call it a handful, but a maximum of 3 or 4. With the exception of Kibaki, who is known for his eloquence. I mean, Kibaki would stand on the floor of the House and talk for a whole hour without referring to notes or anything.
Yes.
And you know, there would be a pin drop silence.
Yeah.
Everybody would want to hear his ideas. Gifted in that. But other than him, the only active members from DP were yourself, Norman Nyaga, and who else can I think of? Maybe Muhika Mutai a little bit.
Yeah.
You then, of course, maintained that fire in DP until he became a president. And then you quit the government.
Yeah.
Is it the same liberals, you know, working class, struggling peasant, vis-a-vis the African elite, which mainly, I would say, had something to do with Kibaki and when he was the Minister of Finance, the people who got promoted in the coffee sector and everywhere who dominated the politics of DP.
Yeah.
So was that battle eventually fought again and ended up with you quitting the cabinet?
I don't think so. I think it's politics of conviction versus politics of anything goes.
Of convenience.
Because, yes, we worked very well with President Kibaki, both as the time he was my leader in DP and even when in government, but we still differed when the occasion came. I remember in 1998, he formed a shadow cabinet. Kiraito had just joined DP from Ford, Kenya. In the last days of 1997,
he was with us, just
before the elections. We had received him. When Kibaki came to form a shadow cabinet, in spite of the fact that I was the elected Secretary for Legal and Constitutional Affairs, he gave Kiraito Shadow Attorney General, which to me is a contradiction because then, as the elected Secretary for Legal, I can contradict his statements inside Parliament because outside I'm the representative. So I called and he gave me social services, which was the ministry Moi had given to Nyiva. I remember holding a press conference and telling my worthy DP chairman then and currently former President Kibaki that he has learned 1 or 2 bad things from Kanu, stereotyping women. And I rejected his shadow ministry. So I rejected the shadow Ministry of Culture and Social Services, which I considered stereotyping. And in order to facilitate my then chairman of the party, Kibaki's wish to have Kiraito as his shadow Attorney General, I resigned as the legal secretary for the party. And I said I'll remain a loyal member of the party and I'll seek leadership from the people when I need it. So my resigning the ministry, you can see there's whatever. And I said then that even if it was a real cabinet position, I would not have taken it. I still remained a loyal member of the party. Obviously, many people who did not understand started viewing me with suspicion, like I had been disloyal to the chairman. But all I had been is outspoken, speaking out my mind and standing on my conviction, on principle. So we had these run-ins, but the president, the former president, continued to value me as a member of the party, as demonstrated by his appointing me a member of his first cabinet. I was still ostracized to a clique around him in the party who, since that time, considered me arrogant. Because standing your ground is sometimes considered arrogant.
Too much of a firebrand.
Yeah,
Yes.
that although they appreciated me in Parliament, fighting for the party and for the country, the fact that I told off the chairman publicly, that was to them sacrilege. Yeah.
Tell me, most people, Kenyans, believe you had a powerful role in the rigging or the lack of rigging of the elections of 2007. More so because you were the face of Kibaki's campaigns.
Yeah.
You were there as
campaigns, really.
Kibaki's quest for another term for the presidency.
No. If you remember those campaigns, I was already ostracized from the party, not really ostracized, but in 2007, I was not a core member of his campaign team, although I was still a cabinet minister.
In water?
I was in justice from 2005.
Yes.
But because there was some fight over the party, I was one of the leaders in NAC Kenya. And they had wanted us to hand over NAC Kenya to Raphael Tuju, who is now a chairman of Jubilee. They had thwarted party elections, but they wanted me to hand over the leadership of the party. They wanted me, Mungatana, and Mutua Katuku to hand over the leadership of the party. And I had refused. So the word on the corridors was that Martha Karua is the one spoiling, and that's how they ended up forming PNU as an umbrella party, because we refused to surrender NAC Kenya. And I told them until there are party elections, we are not going to allow people who are not elected to come and say they have been sent by the president, we surrender the party to them.
But nonetheless, you campaigned very hard for him for the presidency.
I campaigned hard for him in Kirinyaga.
Yes. And
I did not go on the national scene much. I remember going to a Nakuru rally, and they refused to give me a chance to speak. So I stopped going to Kibaki's rallies.
So
I went and helped Kamama in Baringo campaign as a friend. I went and helped Karua in Cherangani, and I went and helped Mungatana in Tana River.
Yes, yes.
Apart from that, you will not see me much, even if you are to replay
in the campaign trail.
In the campaign of 2007.
Yes, yes.
But when the elections, the counting started,
the results were coming in.
They started calling me to come from Kirinyaga and to become the president's agent at KICC.
Yes.
So unknown to many people, I had been ostracized but called at the hour of need. They started calling me on 28th.
They needed your services.
I refused to come because my victory had not been announced. Although counting had finished, and none of my opponents even came to the tallying center because they knew from the polling stations they had lost.
It's a landslide.
They were refusing to announce my win. And I feared that if I left, they could rig me out because some people around the president did not want me back. They considered me a nuisance. Firstly, because I had refused to agree to the payment of Anglo leasing.
Yes.
Number two, the party issues.
You also ran on NAC instead of running on
And also, I had mentioned that I would vie for presidency in 2013.
Yes.
So I was messing the succession plan. So I was an outsider within the power circle.
Within the elite, within
yes. Around the president.
Yes.
But Kenyans will never know this. That's why I'm saying it, to put the record straight.
Yes, yes.
So when I was called to KICC, I refused to come, and I only came on 29th. My victory was declared on 28th, around 5 p.m. I did a lap of honor within Gishogo constituency. Then I went home and slept. I wasn't going to come to Nairobi after spending a day and night at a polling station. I slept, and I came to Nairobi on the morning of 29th. I came home, dropped my people, and then went to State House, then went to KICC. And at KICC, I found that other than George Nyamweya, there were no visible or senior representatives of PNU. And I became the most visible PNU representative, representing Kibaki. When I arrived at KICC, Right Honorable Raila Odinga and all his troops, the Orengos, Anyang' Nyong'o, Balala, William Ruto, all those people were there for him. In fact, KICC looked like Orange House. I even asked whether it was Orange House. But I braved it there to stay as an agent. That was a media center because the counting was not going on there. All that was happening is for us to hear Kevoito announce the results. So anybody wanting to say Martha Karua was part of rigging, then I must have rigged with Orengo, Raila and the others because we were there for the same purpose, to listen to Kevoito. Counting was being done elsewhere. And Kibaki deserved an agent at that center, very much like Raila did.
A what
so
agent?
I was there as Kibaki's agent, and I was alone with George Nyamoya the whole of 29th. After being there overnight, alone with Nyamoya and Orengo and the others for Anyang' Nyong'o and Karuri and the others for Raila, we were joined the next day by the likes of Uhuru Wetangula and Kimunya and many others. Therefore, one must ask themselves, what was the role of KICC? Was there any counting? Is representing President Kibaki an act of rigging? I'm totally unapologetic. I was there to represent my side. Kibaki deserved representation, just like Raila represents. And in any democracy, the contestants
must have their
representatives.
Hold on to your thoughts.
Yes.
We will have a small commercial break.
Yeah.
Viewers, we'll have a commercial break and we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back, viewers, to Speaker's Gallery. Our guest is Honorable Martha Karua. Honorable Martha Karua, I had cut you short. Could you continue with your thoughts?
Well, I was just saying that when we counted, we remained in KICC overnight.
Yes.
I and George Nyamoya representing PNU, and Orengo and Karuri, Senator Orengo and Karuri Omondi representing ODM, and Anyang' Nyong'o coming in at night and going because members of ODM kept on coming to buttress their team. What we discovered, because we were going file after file, records held by IEBC, and we managed to look at 196 constituencies which were complete. Some constituencies in northern Kenya and other places were not complete. We found out that Chepalungu had posted 377,000 votes, which was more than the population of Chepalungu at that time.
The constituency of Chepalungu
alone. And a majority were for Raila, almost 100%.
Yes.
And when we raised the issue, IEBC said it was a mistake. And at that point, because I did not think anybody was out to rig, I thought their votes were being counted the way mine was counted in Geshogo. We accepted it as a mistake. And they came with a typed paper to show the total votes of Cheparungu are 37,000. So from 37 to 37, 377,000.
Was a massive, massive hike.
Yeah, so they showed us that they had adjusted. And we had a constituency in Siaya, which I can't remember, which had 115% above the registered voters. Because the registered votes, you can't even vote 100%.
Yes.
We also had constituencies posting over 90,000 in Nyanza and other places. So
many of the almost the best part of the country and people like me who were involved in that understood that there was actual rigging when the chairman of the ECK, the Electoral Commission of Kenya, Kibutu, said that these results are being cooked somewhere else. Somebody is cooking the results.
Careless talk.
So when the very people who have been entrusted with the task mandated with the task of making sure that only votes that are cast are reflected in the count,
Yeah.
tells you that the votes are being cooked somewhere,
Yeah.
then of course the whole credibility of
The election
exercise goes.
I agree
yes,
with you,
yes.
absolutely. But the truth of the matter
Yes.
is that Kivuito's statement was later vindicated. Results were being cooked in both ODM
sides.
strongholds
And PNU.
and in some of the PNU strongholds.
Yes, yes, yes.
It was unknown to us then. But if you remember the Krieger report that was done in 2008, revealed that there was exaggeration of the ballot
In both
strongholds. And that makes
so
me...
the quantum becomes immaterial. I mean, once the things
Yeah.
are being cooked, then you would never be able to...
Once
Yeah.
there is a, violation of the integrity
of the
vote.
exercise, the thing
Yeah.
has to be repeated then.
Yeah, although some people giving adjustments, give or take,
How has the
still
judiciary,
believed.
how has the judiciary since behaved in terms of precedents? Of course, the Supreme Court does not have a president. It cannot even use its own president.
Let me say
but
this.
the Supreme Court had come up with the justification that what has been proven
Yeah,
is not sufficient
yeah.
to alter
The results.
the results.
Let me say this, that in 2007, if you remember, as the Justice Minister, I had told ODM, of which you were a member then, that if you're aggrieved, go to court. And there are people who take issue with that statement even now. And I still insist that
Yes.
even if it were today, I would say go to court. And I've done what I told them to do.
Yeah.
I'm in court.
In any
The
case-
court has disappointed me, but when the court disappoints me, I appeal. I'm
Yes.
exhausting the justice machinery. I compare a judiciary that has issues to a leaking roof.
Yeah.
If it's raining very hard and it rains in your bedroom,
Yes,
you will not take your bed outside in the rain.
yes.
You will take it to a corner
And try
which
and
is not
fix.
raining.
And try and
So
fix, yeah.
even a weak judiciary is still a judiciary because we cannot advocate for anarchy.
Yes.
So nobody went to court in 2007 except individuals. And if you look at the individual cases, you would see seats were nullified in both ODM and PNU zones,
And repeat exercises were carried
which
out.
means that there was even rigging within those parties.
Intra-party riggings.
Like
and
now,
intra-coalition
my
riggings.
issue with the Kirinyaga gubernatorial elections has nothing to do with NASA.
Yes.
It has something to do with the parties supporting Kibaki. Jubilee and Na Kenya, which were both supporting, not Kibaki, Uhuru.
Uhuru, yes.
In Nyanza, Karan was supporting in
Raila.
both, not Orengo,
No, Oregon's Ugenya.
Ugenya.
Yes.
Karan,
It was supporting Raila.
ODM.
Yeah. And the fellow who went to...
yes, the one who petitioned was also supporting Raila,
ODM,
but as an
yes,
independent.
Yes.
So that tells you that rigging happens
Yes.
in strongholds of certain parties. And I am saying the cure to this in this country is every individual given responsibility to do their job.
Yes.
You counting clerk, you presiding officer,
Yes.
you polling official, and you citizen who is campaigning for person X.
You have a
Let
responsibility.
us respect the integrity of elections and of
the
the
law.
systems
The
we
law.
have set,
Yes.
and let us uphold the rule of law. And
Coming
until
to the rule of
we
law.
start
Yes,
holding
yes.
individuals to account,
Yes.
IEBC is not an animal. It comprises of individuals employed
Yes.
in the commission and in the civil service of the IEBC. So until we hold individuals, including candidates and their supporters, to account,
Yes.
it will be a vicious cycle of rigging.
Coming to rule of law.
Yeah,
You were a minister
yeah,
under Kibaki.
yeah,
And it was precisely at that time when Kibaki was the president when the extrajudicial killing or the clampdown
yeah,
of the Mungiki youths
yeah,
and certain youths also in Northeastern Province
Yeah.
were carried out, extrajudicial killings.
yeah,
Under your government,
yeah.
I don't know whether you are at that time in the right ministry or you're still in the ministry. It started when you're in the ministry.
Yeah.
What happened? What went wrong?
I can tell
Collective
you
responsibility.
something went wrong
Yes.
in office of the president.
Yes.
And I am on record inside cabinet meetings and outside publicly condemning extrajudicial killings.
Yes.
I spoke out And I remember even when the son of a colleague in Parliament, Patrick Muiruri,
Yes.
a member of NAC Kenya that time, he was
Very
already
well-educated young boy. Yeah.
already out of Parliament.
Yes.
I remember even going to the funeral and apologizing on behalf of the government.
Yes.
I remember the case of two human rights activists,
Yes.
George Ouru
Yes.
and the young lawyer.
Being shot,
You see?
killed in Nairobi in a
Near
traffic jam.
State House.
In a traffic jam near State House.
And I remember going to the funeral wake and apologizing. I do not believe in extrajudicial killing, whether when I was a minister or before it. I have always stood for the rule of law. Arrest somebody, use only necessary force to arrest, and you don't shoot to kill. You shoot to immobilize if it's necessary.
Yes.
So we cannot substitute arrests for shooting to kill. It's a blot on our history. When the Kibaki government came in, and immediately I went to the Ministry of Justice, I found an absolutely good record. Human rights had changed from worse to better. When I went to report on behalf of the ministry in 2006, early 2006, at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Accra, Ghana, I was a proud minister telling them of the improved human rights record.
Later?
2 years later, in March, was it March of 2009, because I refused to go to Geneva in 2008 after the post-election violence. I went to apologize in Geneva because of the deaths that had occurred through extrajudicial killings and post-election violence. I went with my head bowed,
yes,
and promising we would improve our record.
It's never improved.
Something went terribly wrong, and government was unable to coordinate. But I'm on record even when Professor Aston came in 2007, 2008, differing with my colleagues and agreeing with some of the members of the coalition government like Orengo in ODM, and telling off the then government spokesperson, Alfred Mutua, who is now Machakos governor, telling him it was wrong to castigate Professor Ashton because the human rights violation he was talking about, it's information he gathered from Kenyans.
Which was true.
And if we are telling off
Large.
Ashton, it's our nationals we are telling off. And therefore, we must improve our human rights record.
Tell me, we are here talking about human rights records. People they still have forced disappearances in Northeastern Province.
Yeah.
People are disappearing.
And all over
every other
Kenya.
day, and all over Kenya,
Yeah.
yes. You ran as a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
You have seen it all.
Yeah.
You have seen transaction of politics as an activist,
Yeah.
as an opposition member, a very vocal opposition member of parliament,
Yeah.
member in the 7th parliament and all the subsequent until you joined the government. And you've also been on the side of the government. You're also out of the government and you ran as a presidential candidate. What would you do differently from what, say, Kibaki's government did when you served them for 6 years?
Yeah, 6.5.
Or what Uhuru's government is doing right now when you supported him for the presidency this time around?
In one word,
Yes.
I would bring discipline. Rule of law is the rule of discipline because you go by the rules that you have set. And when there is rule of law or discipline, it means institutions function. It means people entrusted with their positions do what is right, and if they do not do, they are held to account and kicked out of their positions or punished for their transgressions. If we do not play by the rules we have set, whether it is elections or is in the performance of our duties, the situation is chaos. The chaos that we are seeing in terms of road accidents is lack of discipline. We are not following the rule of law. And those who are caught, the few who are caught, when they go to the courts, they are able to wiggle their way out.
Including murder cases and people who are out there.
Murder cases, we have people who are corrupt and can get out of the investigators' news, can get out of the court, whatever. And I'm saying since the new dispensation, since the 210 Constitution, which was supposed to bring total transformation in the way we do things, supposed to fight corruption, fight impunity, and bring order and discipline. The failure we are experiencing of the total transformation is the failure of us as professionals in Kenya, as people entrusted with positions, failing to do their bit.
So you believe that this constitution must be redone again, or some parts of this constitution?
No, it is not the constitution. What really we need is to transform ourselves. It is you,
the constitution allows somebody to be given a bail, even if he's done carried out a murder.
The constitution gives discretion to the court.
Yes.
That discretion is being either misinterpreted or deliberately abused.
Yes.
When you are giving bail, the constitution does not uphold the right of individual above the right of society.
Yes, yes.
When you are a suspect for murder, so the crime of murder, it is the society, the republic as a whole, taking you to court to prove your guilt that you have murdered a fellow human being. So when the court is giving bail, it must consider the rights of the accused person as against the rights of society. There is nowhere the constitution says you must give the suspect for murder bail, even when it is untenable. Yeah. It is also unconscionable for a suspect for a serious crime like murder or corruption to return to office under the guise that it is a constitutional office. When the law is so clear, and the Civil Service Code of Conduct, that once you are accused of a criminal offense, you stand suspended.
Interdicted, actually, that's the word.
You are on half pay.
Yes.
You cannot possibly return.
Until you're cleared, or if you're convicted, you're dismissed.
You are dismissed.
Somebody dismissed
there
without any benefits.
There is no question of the court claiming that a constitutional office holder, it is not provided.
So the court
is refusing to use imagination. It's also failing to balance the interest and to interpret the law correctly.
And the corruption.
You see?
Yes.
I believe it's either deliberate or missing the point. And I think in the judiciary and in all professions, whether it is engineers approving roads that are half done or half baked, or an accountant approving cooked books, or a lawyer exaggerating their fees, we must find a way of holding each other as professionals and as officers given responsibility by this country to account. Otherwise, we shall not be able to fight corruption. I want to salute the office of the DPP.
Yes.
I have said before on my Twitter handle, I have not in recent history seen a DPP apply themselves the way the office of the DPP is.
Haji is doing it now, yes.
I have not seen a director of CID doing what Genoti is doing.
Now, yes.
There are few judicial officers who can be commended. But on the whole, we appear to have lost it in the judiciary as far as balancing the interests of the public as against the rights of the individual.
Yes.
Something seems to be lost.
Rights that are debatable in a sense.
And I think I'm saying that as lawyers, our mandate is also to help the government and the society in matters of the rule of law. And I think it is time that symposiums that involve all stakeholders are held. And I would want to challenge our universities where we can take stock of the jurisprudence that has come in terms of cases of corruption, integrity cases, murder cases, cases that affect interpretation of the Constitution in the new dispensation, so that we can be able to commend good decisions, we can be able to out the bad decisions, which will shame those who have made them, and to encourage proper interpretation of the Constitution. This Constitution is a good document. What is wrong is our attitude and misinterpretation. And although there may be no law is perfect, and any law can be amended, even if we amend 1,000 times, continue with the same attitude, it will not be helpful.
Now, Kenyans are celebrating the extradition of two for the fact that they have already admitted in court anyway in the US.
Yeah.
But they were able to buy the freedom here. Were able to run their operations here.
I think...
And now Kenyans are celebrating the fact that they have been extradited to the US and they've been convicted in the US. And do we have to depend or pray for an external force to come and bring us justice in our own country?
It's a great shame.
Yes.
Yet, it's something that those who believe in the rule of law are saluting.
Yes.
The convictions out of plea of guilty of the Akashas, not because you want a fellow Kenyan to languish in jail, but knowing the drug menace in this country.
And how the way it has destroyed our youth.
Drug cartels continue to hold not just the judiciary, but sections of the judiciary, but the executive and the investigators to, to paralyze them and to hold them ransom.
Yep.
So Kenyans celebrate the fact that that particular cartel has been laid bare and is in the process of being decimated.
Do we need
pray.
Do we need to amend the extradition laws to make it much easier and faster for that determination, so that they don't have to keep on running rings around us in our local courts here?
Two things. As a sovereign nation, we cannot depend on another country to do our laundry.
Yes.
Yes, extradition laws should be easier. We have had 2 or 3 cases. We have the Gishuru bribery case, Gishuru Okemo bribery case, and we have the Akashas. The Akashas did not go through an extradition process. Maybe if they had gone through the process, they would still be going around in the Kenyan courts. So what we are saying, like the election cases, if I were asked, extradition cases would be expedited and finished within a month. And if there are appeals in the first court, if there is an appeal, another 1 month. If there is an appeal to a higher court, another month. So within 3 months, a suspect for extradition should know whether they are remaining here or going out. But secondly, we must improve our system because we cannot expect external forces to be doing our laundry. We must be able to clean up our criminal justice system, which means investigators, prosecutors, the whole chain, the judiciary, lawyers, because lawyers also aid and abet some of the lawyers.
And the cardinal responsibility or loyalty of a lawyer, first and foremost, is that
fidelity to the law.
He is an officer of the
court. Of the court.
Yes.
We have
he or she is an officer of the court.
We must really put our act together. Absolutely. And I want to notice in appreciation that President Uhuru Kenyatta, together with the former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, have said their unity of purpose, among other things, is to assist in the fight against corruption and impunity. I would want not to be a skeptic, but just to cheer them on, and as a Kenyan pledge to do whatever I can do to help that fight, and to urge fellow citizens, let us each do our bit, so that this time round we uproot the forces of impunity. We must do the best we can to rid this country of the cancer of corruption and its twin, impunity, because those two are destroying the country.
You ran as a governor last time, but we cannot discuss that particular part of your life because it's in court now.
I'm now in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you're in the Supreme Court, and it's going to be sub judice.
Yes.
But you also ran as a president.
Yes.
And you haven't made your intentions known whether in 2022 you will run as a president or you will still want to run again as a governor of Kirinyaga. And I don't want to push you to that.
But I've said this.
Yes.
As far as running for presidency is concerned, I have said I am not done.
Yes.
As far as politics of this country, including being governor of Kirinyaga, I am not done. At the age of 61, politically I'm young.
Very young indeed.
Very young.
That also puts me in the same category.
And I have a lot to give to this country.
Can I now ask you, I'll give you 2 scenarios.
Yes.
If you ran as a president and you won the elections, in 2 minutes, tell us the things that you think should be addressed in this country, the areas that you are so committed to. And if you're not going to run as a president and you
Yeah.
have to make a choice between two presidential candidates, then I'll also come back to that one. But can you give this in 2 minutes first? What would you do differently and how would you do it?
I said in one word,
Yes.
I would bring discipline. And
Yes.
discipline means rule of law.
Yes, yes.
Where there is rule of law, institutions function. And where institutions function, individuals take responsibility. If it's courts of law, you cannot keep on saying the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice doesn't man all the courts. You've got to find a mechanism which enables the judiciary to hold to account each of its officers and all judgments, because each judicial officer is independent. You cannot interfere them when they are doing the cases. But you can audit their judgments thereafter. And it is possible. And the audit is not by the presidency. The judiciary actually, in my view,
Has got
ought
an
to
internal
have
mechanism.
together with the Law Society, should have a peer
Internal
committee.
mechanism, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
where decisions are audited, outstandingly good or shockingly bad decisions are audited. And I always say a decision can reveal either incompetency,
Yes.
corruption,
Yes.
or both,
Yeah.
or pure excellence,
Yes.
which is due for rewarding. These must be the systems through which
This
you
is-
ask people to show
yes,
cause or you
yes,
promote.
yes.
But now what is happening in the judiciary, even when in the appointments, the process of appointment is not clear enough. So we end up appointing
Yes.
good people
While on
as
this-
well as bad people who have failed in practice.
While you're still
that's-
on that one,
Yeah.
this is a country where some sections of the country are very well developed, super
Yeah.
developed,
Yeah,
and some are extremely backwards and lack infrastructure.
yeah,
So these are two Kenyans. There are places in this country when they're coming to Nairobi, they say we're going to Kenya, like Turkana,
Yeah.
like Samburu, like Mandera.
yeah.
Now, how would you want to reconcile these things when you become, if you're a president?
I would first say this. Close to 8 years of devolution,
Yes,
each county
yes,
should have a level of transformation that shows the residents of that country devolution is something. If any part of Kenya is not feeling the effect of devolution, blame it on your governor. Even those mega funds can bring up change. But I want to blame the successive governments of Kenya for having a different template for development in different parts of Kenya. Having what they were calling as independence, high potential and less potential areas, and a pretext to neglect parts of Kenya.
Discrimination.
And that is why during constitution making in Naivasha, I'm proud to have proposed
Yes.
the Equalization Fund,
yes,
a section I borrowed from the Canadian Constitution.
yes.
And we had hoped that that section would enable the governments thereafter to devote sufficient funds to accelerate development in hitherto neglected marginal
Marginalized,
areas,
yes, yes.
to ensure that in 5 to 10 years, the
Everybody
whole
is at par.
country is at par.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
that never happened.
the money that has been devoted to Equalization Fund
Yes.
since the advent of
Of this,
the new
yes,
constitution
yes,
is apparently, I think so far 10 billion. If they have added,
Yes.
I'll be corrected.
yes,
If I were president, I would ensure that at least 100 billion goes to the Equalization Fund each year. That would enable infrastructure, because what are you talking about? You're talking about roads, you're talking about water, electricity, you're talking about ensuring that there are schools,
yes,
you're talking about dispensaries, essential services. People do not need you to put money in their pockets. They just need infrastructure. The rest will do itself. This country is missing on an opportunity. The moment you open up the entire country, you unleash the economic potential of this country for the benefit of everyone. It is inconceivable that Turkana, which we are expecting to give us revenue from oil,
yes,
8 years since the exploration and expectation started, the road from Pokot to Lodwar
yes,
has not yet been tarmacked.
yes.
It had been tarmacked
Yeah. It's
by partner funds, and that tarmac had finished.
yes,
It is not right that we do not have a tarmac road from Garissa
To Mandela.
to Wajir, and to Mandera, and to other places. We salute the fact that
Moyale.
since Kebake days, the Moyale Road now has been finished, and several other roads, but we are saying we have no excuse that the road from Mombasa to Malaba is not a dual carriageway. There are things we should have done, and we must accelerate to release the potential of this country,
If you don't
and which we are unable to do because of one thing.
Corruption.
Indiscipline,
Corruption.
which has ensured that there is maximum corruption, maximum impunity, that every year we are losing 1/3 of the budget. If we are in a trillion budget, it means 1 trillion is going down the drain.
3 trillion is.
You see?
Yes.
We have a 3 trillion budget. It means 1 trillion is going down the drain. That trillion could transform
This country.
the entire country.
If you don't run as a presidential candidate,
Yeah.
and you had a choice between Ruto and Raila,
Yeah.
who would you support?
I would obviously support Raila, but it's far away from Raila. One, Raila hasn't declared, but I've said I consider Ruto unsuitable, and I have my own reasons. His supporters have their own reasons, but I also have my right to speak out. I consider him totally unsuitable, but that's my view as an individual. Raila is a person who has worked for this country, a person we have worked together. Nobody is perfect. If you gave me the two, I wouldn't even have to think. I'd take Raila running. I do not know what 2022 has for us. I can't even tell you which seat I'll be running for. It's a long way to come.
Do we have to change the constitution and have a parliamentary system?
I don't think it's necessary, but if it becomes the wish of Kenyans, we never should be rigid. We should listen to those who want it and their reasons. We are yet to get the reasons.
Subject it even to a referendum if it's a big mass of people.
I keep an open mind. I chose a presidential system, and I think now Kenya was the only political party, apart from NCCK, who had chosen a presidential system. That doesn't mean that I must keep a close mind. If our colleagues convince us that a parliamentary should be better, I will have problems with separation of power, but I'm willing to hear and make a decision. And I have said, should the referendum come, the women of Kenya must demand 50-50. That from MCAs up to governors and presidency 50-50. How do we achieve that? And the presidency is 1 seat and governor 1 seat. By saying the running mate of a president and the running mate of a governor must be of the opposite gender. All the other seats we can go 50-50. After all, women form more than 50% of this country. And democracy is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. Women are 50% or slightly more. It cannot be the people without 50%. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It has been an exhilarating session. I am sure Kenyans will find that, and you cannot exhaust
Unfortunately, we cannot.
Everything with Martha Karua, with all these years of experience and this wealth of intellectual prowess in one session. I'm looking forward to hosting you another time also. We will discuss other issues that have not been discussed now. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for this very great initiative. And I look forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.